I'm Kay. Sitting in my home office, I'm still processing the series of events that transpired after Jake's housewarming party. It's been a long journey, filled with both pain and hope, and I'm ready to share the story from the beginning. It all started when I received a text message from Jake. The message came with a photo of a luxurious apartment with gleaming marble countertops. Housewarming at my new luxury apartment. Finally living somewhere that matches my success level. Hope you can make it, sis. Jake. I stared at the address on my phone screen, 1247, Metropolitan Heights, Unit 3C, while going through the monthly reports from my property management company. The address was all too familiar because I'd been poring over the building's financials all morning. 2 years ago, during a market downturn, the previous owner of this luxury high-rise defaulted on their debt. I saw an opportunity and purchased the distressed property for $34 million. It was one of my more challenging acquisitions, but I was determined to turn it around. I invested $8 million in upgrades, and now, it's one of the city's most desirable luxury residential buildings, commanding premium rents and maintaining a 97% occupancy rate. Jake, my stepbrother, had been part of my family for 12 years. Ever since my mom married his father when I was young, he'd always looked down on me. For the past 5 years, he'd been telling anyone who would listen that I was a minimum wage failure. He simply assumed that because I lived modestly and drove a practical car, I must be struggling financially. Little did he know that over the past decade, while he was climbing the corporate ladder at a mid-tier marketing firm, I'd quietly built a real estate empire worth $156 million. I'd been strategically acquiring undervalued properties, renovating them, and creating a portfolio of high-end residential and commercial spaces. Despite his attitude towards me, I decided to attend the housewarming party. Partly out of curiosity and partly because I hadn't seen that side of my family in several months. Jake had become increasingly distant as his career advanced, making it clear that he found my presence at family gatherings embarrassing. The party was on a Saturday evening. I arrived on time, wearing a simple black dress and carrying a modest housewarming gift. As I entered the lobby of Metropolitan Heights, I was reminded of the hard work I'd put into its renovation. The marble floors, contemporary lighting, and the concierge desk I'd personally approved were all there, looking as impressive as ever. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor, noticing the high-quality finishes and the quiet efficiency of the building systems I'd upgraded. When the elevator doors opened, I could hear music and conversation coming from Unit 3C. The apartment was filled with Jake's colleagues from the marketing firm and several family members. Jake greeted me at the door with a look of surprise and mild embarrassment. "Kay, you actually came. I wasn't sure." He gestured around the elegant surroundings. "I mean, I know this kind of place isn't really your scene." I replied, "It's lovely, Jake. Congratulations on the new apartment." He then said, "Yeah, I finally made it to a place that matches my income level. It feels good to live somewhere that reflects actual success." The comment stung, but I kept my composure. Jake led me into the living room, where about 30 people were mingling with wine glasses and catered appetizers. I recognized my stepdad, Henry, Jake's sister, Lily, and a few cousins. Jake announced, "Everyone, you remember my stepsister Kay. She managed to make it tonight despite her busy work schedule." The way he said it made it clear he was referring to what he assumed was my minimum wage job. Several people glanced at me with a mix of politeness and pity. Lily, who worked in finance, said, "What a nice surprise. We don't usually see you at events in this part of town." I simply replied, "I manage." As the evening went on, I circulated through the party, listening to conversations about career achievements, salary increases, and the challenges of living in such a high-end neighborhood. People kept commenting on how expensive the area was, how exclusive the building had become, and how fortunate Jake was to afford such luxury. The building's rental rates were mentioned several times, with tones of impressed admiration. $4,200 a month for a one-bedroom, someone marveled. That's more than some people make in 3 months. Jake was clearly enjoying the attention, giving impromptu tours of the apartment and highlighting the premium appliances, the marble bathroom, and the spectacular view. He told one group, "This is what happens when you work hard and make smart career moves. You earn the right to live in places like this." My stepdad, Henry, approached me as I stood by the floor-to-the-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" he said. "It really is. Jake's done well for himself. This place must cost a fortune." I replied, "I'm sure it does. It makes me proud to see him achieving this kind of success. You know, Kay, you might want to think about what Jake's done here. Maybe it would inspire you to aim a little higher in your own career." His words carried the implication that I needed inspiration to achieve what Jake had. I just said, "I'll definitely consider that." As the night wore on, the comments became less subtle. Around 9:30 p.m. Jake, clearly a bit drunk, decided to make an impromptu speech. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate this milestone. This apartment represents more than just a place to live. It represents the reward for hard work, smart decisions, and refusing to settle for less than you deserve." The crowd nodded in agreement. He continued, "I look around this room and I see people who understand that success isn't just about what you do. It's about how you live, where you live, and the standards you set for yourself. Some people are content to live modestly, work basic jobs, and never aspire to anything better. And that's fine. Someone has to work minimum wage, right? But the people in this room tonight are different. We're the ones who push ourselves to achieve more." I could feel everyone's eyes turning towards me. Jake then said, "My stepsister Kay is here tonight, and I want her to see what's possible when you refuse to settle. Kay, you've been working the same office job for years, living in that little apartment, driving that old car. But look around you. This is what success actually looks like." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence as I realized he was using me as a cautionary tale. He got louder and more aggressive. "You don't belong in nice places like this. Minimum wage workers like you ruin neighborhoods like this. They bring down property values and change the whole character of an area." He gestured at my simple dress and practical shoes. "You can't even afford to dress appropriately for a place like this. It's embarrassing." Lily nodded in agreement. "Jake's right. There are standards to maintain in buildings like this." My stepdad, Henry, remained silent. Jake went on, "The truth is, people like Kay don't understand what it takes to earn your way into luxury. They think they're entitled to be included in everything, but they haven't put in the work or made the sacrifices." The humiliation was overwhelming, but I held my ground. I set down my water glass, gathered my purse, and said quietly, "You're absolutely right, Jake. I should go." He called after me, "Don't take it personally, Kay. Maybe this will motivate you to work harder and aim higher in life." I left without arguing, took the elevator down through my own building, walked past my own concierge desk, and drove home in my reliable car. That evening, I sat in my home office and reviewed Jake's lease agreement. He'd signed a 12-month agreement 6 weeks ago, paying first month, last month, and a security deposit totaling $12,600 up front. His application showed an annual salary of $78,000 from his marketing job, but it was clear he was stretching his finances to afford this place. I spent an hour going over the building's lease termination policies and tenant conduct guidelines. As the owner, I had the power to make decisions regarding tenant selection and retention, especially when it came to behavior that could affect the building's reputation or community atmosphere. The next morning, I called my property management company. "Patricia, this is Kay. I need you to handle a lease termination for Metropolitan Heights." She asked, "Of course. Which unit and what's the reason?" I replied, "Unit 3C, tenant Jake. The reason is conduct inconsistent with building community standards." No need for a formal review process. This is a direct owner decision. Please call the tenant this morning and inform him that his lease is terminated effective immediately. He has 30 days to vacate per the lease terms. At 10:23 a.m. My phone rang. It was Jake. His voice was frantic. "Kay, the craziest thing just happened. The property management company called and said my lease is terminated. They said it's the building owner's decision." I feigned surprise and asked, "That's terrible, Jake. Did they give you a reason?" He said, "They said something about conduct inconsistent with building standards, but that doesn't make any sense. I haven't done anything wrong." I asked, "How strange. Did you try talking to someone in charge?" He replied, "I called back and demanded to speak with the building owner, but they said the owner doesn't take calls from tenants and the decision is final." Then he asked, "Kay, do you happen to know anyone in real estate who might be able to help me understand what's happening?" The irony was almost too much. I said carefully, "I might know someone who could provide information." He pleaded, "Really? Could you ask them? I'm desperate. I put down almost $13,000 on this place and I can't afford to lose it." I told him I'd see what I could find out. I then called Patricia back. "Please send Mr. Jake written notice that his lease termination is due to public disparagement of other tenants based on perceived socioeconomic status. Include a copy of our community standards policy that prohibits discrimination and harassment. State that building management received reports of the tenant making derogatory comments about other residents' financial status and declaring that certain people don't belong in the building." 2 hours later, Jake called again. "Kay, I got a letter from the building management company. They're saying I violated some community standards policy by discriminating against other tenants based on economic status." I asked, "What kind of discrimination?" He said, "They claim I made derogatory comments about residents' financial status and said people don't belong in the building." "But Kay, I never said anything like that about other tenants." I asked, "Are you sure?" He replied, "Of course I'm sure. The only time I talked about people not belonging in nice places was when I was talking about." And then he realized. "Oh God. Kay. Did someone report what I said about you at the party?" I asked, "What did you say about me, Jake?" He stammered, "I said some things about minimum wage workers and people not belonging in luxury buildings." "But Kay, you're not even a tenant. How could that violate their policy?" I explained, "Maybe because I was a guest in the building and your comments created a hostile environment." He said, "But that's not fair. I was just talking about economic realities." I retorted, "You said I don't belong in nice places. You said minimum wage workers like me ruin neighborhoods. You said I was embarrassing and couldn't afford to dress appropriately for the building." He tried to defend himself, but I cut him off. "Jake, what you meant was that you thought you were better than me because of money. And apparently, building management doesn't want tenants who treat people that way." He pleaded, "Kay, please. Is there anything you can do? Anyone you can call? I'll lose everything, my deposit, my first and last month's rent, and I don't have anywhere else to go." I told him I'd make some calls. Instead, I took a closer look at his financial situation. His lease application showed that he was spending 65% of his gross income on rent alone. His job at the marketing firm was also precarious, as the company had laid off 30% of its workforce in the past year. The next day, I called Jake back. I spoke with someone connected to the building management. He asked, "What did they say? Can they reverse the termination?" I said, "Jake, I need to ask you something first. Are you really making $78,000 a year?" He was defensive. "Why would you ask that?" I replied, "Because the person I spoke with mentioned that your lease approval was marginal based on your income verification." I also asked about the security of his job. He was annoyed. "Why are you asking all these questions? I explained, the building management wants to understand whether this was an isolated incident of poor judgment or part of a pattern of behavior. They're wondering if someone who publicly humiliates family members based on perceived financial status might also treat building staff, neighbors, or service workers inappropriately. He said, I would never. But I reminded him, Jake, you spent an entire evening telling 30 people that I was a failure because you thought I was poor. You said I didn't belong in nice places and that I was embarrassing to be around. He tried to say it was different with family, but I countered, is it? From the building's perspective, if you'll treat family that way in public, how might you treat a maintenance worker or a delivery person or a neighbor who doesn't meet your standards? There was a long silence. Then he asked, Kay, what do I have to do to fix this? I said, I don't know if you can fix it, Jake. The decision seems pretty final. He was desperate. There has to be something. A fine, a warning, community service, anything. I told him, the person I spoke with mentioned that the building owner is particularly sensitive to discrimination issues because they've worked hard to create an inclusive community environment. It means that exclusive doesn't have to mean exclusionary. You can have high standards without treating people badly based on assumptions about their background. He said, I get it now. I understand. Can you please ask them to give me another chance? I said, Jake, before I make any calls, I need you to understand something. This isn't really about the building policy. This is about the fact that you've spent years treating me like I was beneath you because you made assumptions about my financial situation. You never once asked about my actual job. You never inquired about my career goals or my life plans. You simply decided I was a failure and treated me accordingly. He admitted, I was wrong. I was cruel. And I was cruel not just to you, but to anyone else I perceived as being lower on the economic ladder. I asked, can you change? He promised, I will. I promise I will. I then asked, Jake, what do you think my actual job is? He said, I thought you worked in some office doing administrative stuff. I revealed, I own a real estate investment company with a portfolio worth $156 million. I own Metropolitan Heights. I've owned it for 2 years. You've been paying rent to me. There was a long silence on the other end. He finally said, that's not possible. You own my building? I replied, I own your building along with 14 other properties in the metropolitan area. I choose to live modestly because I learned early that how you treat people reveals your character, not your bank balance. He said, Kay, I had no idea. I said, that's exactly right. You had no idea, but you treated me badly anyway. What does that tell you about yourself? He admitted, I'm an idiot. I'm a complete idiot. I told him, you're someone who judges people based on appearances and assumptions. And that's exactly why your lease is terminated. You find somewhere else to live, and you think very carefully about the person you want to be. He pleaded, Kay, please. I'm begging you. I'll do anything. Public apology, community service, whatever it takes. I said, Jake, I didn't terminate your lease because I was angry about the party. I terminated it because your behavior demonstrated that you're not the kind of person I want living in my building. Maybe you can change, but you'll need to prove that somewhere else. He was worried about losing the deposit money. I said, then maybe you'll understand what it feels like to be financially vulnerable and worry about being judged for it. He said, Kay, we're family. I replied, are we? Because family doesn't publicly humiliate each other for sport. For 3 days, Jake called, cycling through anger, bargaining, and desperation. He offered to pay additional fees, sign community service agreements, and make public apologies. But I'd made my decision based on my principles. I wanted tenants who treated everyone with dignity, regardless of their social or economic status. After a week, my stepdad, Henry, called. Kay, I need to talk to you about Jake's situation. I asked, what about it? He said, He says you own his building and you're evicting him because of what he said at the party? I replied, that's accurate. He said, "Kay, he's family. Surely you can work something out." I asked, Henry, were you there when Jake spent 10 minutes explaining to 30 people that I don't belong in nice places? He said, he was drunk and he said some things he shouldn't have. I countered, he was expressing his genuine beliefs about me and people like me. The alcohol just made him honest about it. He said, but to evict him from his home. I asked, Henry, why didn't you speak up at the party? When Jake was humiliating me in front of the whole family, why didn't you say anything? He said, it was awkward. I didn't want to make a scene. I said, but you're comfortable calling me now to ask for special treatment for the person who made that scene.